Episode 23 of the Tool Bags Up Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Sebastian Caballero. Gotta talk about what went down this weekend. NFL Draft 2020. A lot of surprises happened over the weekend. A lot of teams improved tremendously, some not so much. We're going to talk about some of those. I'm going to tell you my 6 favorite and my 6 least favorite moves of the weekend and the offseason. Okay, gotta include the offseason there only because some of these moves, some of these picks would not have been able to happen without some of these trades. Of course, there are some trades that were replaced with first round picks, and we have to include those as well. So let's get started. Here we go. Let's start off with a team that I love, the San Francisco 49ers. I mean, what a offseason they have had, but especially what a weekend they had. Not only with their draft picks, they were able to draft Javon Kinlaw from South Carolina to replace DeForest Buckner. As you guys know, they traded DeForest Buckner for a first round pick and got its replacement, and for a lot cheaper. Not sure if they'll have the same amount of production right away, but expect Kinlaw to fill in that void. The San Francisco 49ers aren't going nowhere. Then they get their wide receiver. They get the replacement for Emmanuel Sanders and Brandon Ayuk. With their second first-round pick, they traded up to get him. Excellent move right there. I had Henry Ruggs going to the 49ers. I thought that was the best fit. But Brandon Ayuk definitely, just as good. And according to some 49ers representatives, they said that Ayuk was their guy from the go. So great draft from them. And I think the best move that they made was trading for Trent Williams, a Pro Bowl caliber offensive tackle. And they gave up a 3rd and a 5th rounder. Obviously, Joe Staley came out and he said that he was going to retire. But they quickly were able to find a replacement for him. And there you go. They got a great offensive tackle, a young rookie wide receiver, and a really good defensive tackle. A+ for the San Francisco 49ers. Now a team that I hated, the Las Vegas Raiders. Not that I didn't like the players that they chose. I just thought that they could have gone other routes. And what I mean by that, they took Henry Ruggs with their first draft pick in the first round when Jerry Jeudy was still available there. Jerry Jeudy was there on their laps, and I thought that he fit their scheme better than what Henry Ruggs is. I don't think Derek Carr is that quarterback that's just going to launch one and let just Henry Ruggs go out and get it. I just think Jerry Jeudy was the best overall receiver in this draft. I'm surprised that he fell down to 15. Broncos ended up getting a steal. And then the second pick that they got with Damon Arnett, not that it was a bad pick, but he does have issues that could cause problems there with the Raiders. Now, I did question some of their draft picks last year, and they did end up panning out, but I thought they could have done a little bit better. And then also with their quarterback situation, they brought in Marcus Mariota, which I don't think is a bad signing for a backup. But when you had guys like Cam and guys like Jameis available there to make your team a little bit better, I think they were really they were better fits for you in order to compete in a very tough AFC West. And I wasn't a fan of that. Didn't give them a bad grade. I gave them a B. I just thought they could have had a much better draft, and that's why I didn't like it. On to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Love their draft. I mean, could they do anything wrong during this offseason, man? I mean, they got the primary target, everybody's primary target in the offseason, Tom Brady. They were able to bring Gronk out of retirement, arguably one of the best tight ends of all time. And then they hit a home run with the draft, man. They were able to get what some people consider to be the best offensive tackle in the draft, Tristan Wirfs, at 13. They were able to get arguably the best safety in the draft in Antoine Winfield Jr. from Minnesota in the 2nd round. They got his teammate Eddie Johnson in the 4th round, got Brady an extra weapon. And I think that Johnson was probably one of the most underrated receivers in this draft, only because this wide receiver draft is so deep. But they just did an excellent job putting pieces around Brady. They added another running back to go along with Ronald Jones II. Just gave Brady much more weapons. I loved everything that they were doing. Originally, I had them as a wild card team. They could overtake the Saints in the division after the moves that they made in the offseason. Team that I hated, the Chicago Bears. What a surprise. So, didn't like what they did in the offseason bringing in Nick Foles. Much like the Raiders, I thought there was better options for them at quarterback. They decided to trade for Nick Foles. I get it. He fits that system. But is Nick Foles going to make you a Super Bowl contender? No. I get it. He won a Super Bowl, but he only had to play 6 games to get to that Super Bowl. And on top of that, Jameis was the right guy for this spot. Jameis has the big arm. He's got the talent. You could even go Cam Newton, even though there's concerns for me. They just showed me basically that they wanted to bring in a guy that was going to compete with Mitch Trubisky, but at least give Mitch a chance to still keep his starting spot. So I didn't like that. Then not only that, then in the draft, they go ahead and they draft a tight end first when Antoine Winfield was just there for the taking with their first pick in the second round. Wasn't a fan of the tight end. I think he would have been there later on. They did end up taking the safety from Utah, who, from everything that I'm hearing, is a stud. But I thought Winfield was just a for sure thing. I thought that they could have done some different things with the tight end position. I really don't understand it, especially after they paid Jimmy Graham $9 million to come to Chicago. And they had 9 other tight ends on the roster. It doesn't make sense to me. I gave them a C-. I will say, however, that some of the guys that they did pick, this could turn into a B, depending on how these moves turn out. But for me, it's either a B or an F. I gave them a C-. Did not like their moves this offseason. On to another team that I like, surprisingly, the Browns, the Cleveland Browns. They ended up getting their offensive tackle in the first round, Jedrick Willis Jr., offensive tackle from Alabama. Thought that was a great choice there. And then they addressed their secondary. Grant Delpit ended up landing on their laps there in the second round. So they tightened up the secondary. And then their offseason moves were just awesome, man. I mean, they brought in Austin Hooper. They got Jack Conklin from Tennessee. Brought him in to address that offensive line. I think Baker's mistakes last year had to do with the minimal protection that he had last year, and the fact that they addressed that, they kept their weapons, they actually added weapons. I think that the Browns are really ready to take off this year. So far, a great start to Kevin Stefanski's career as a head coach in the NFL. A team I didn't like, of course, the Houston Texans. They got an F from me. Clear as day, just all their offseason moves just killed it for me. It really did not matter what they were going to do in the draft, because it just doesn't make sense. I mean, you trade arguably the best receiver in the game for peanuts, basically. And then you go ahead and you traded a second-round pick to acquire an injury-prone Brandon Cooks, who's probably one hard hit away from being out of the NFL. So that didn't make sense to me, especially when this is the deepest wide receiver draft in years. Like, it just didn't make sense for them to make all the moves that they're making. And then not only that, but then last year they got rid of all these picks and acquired all this talent to make a Super Bowl run, and then you just trade it away. It's almost like they're punting on the year. 1 year after they went all in to try to win a Super Bowl, they've gone from being the best team in that division to being the third best team in that division. When you downgrade like that, you could only get an F from me. F for the Houston Texans. The Indianapolis Colts, loved everything they did in the draft. Not so much what they did in the offseason, but what they did in the draft was awesome. Okay, they drafted Michael Pittman Jr. from USC, who's a sleeper wide receiver. He's going to be able to produce right away. And you put him on the opposite side of T.Y. Hilton, they're going to produce a lot of points this year. Phillip Rivers just got himself another weapon and added to his receiving core. And then not to mention, they added what I thought was the best running back prospect in this draft in Jonathan Taylor. He was the most complete running back, in my opinion. He does have a fumbling issue, but the way that he ran at Wisconsin and the way he ran over Big Ten defenses, he was clearly my guy to take from this draft. I saw a lot of Melvin Gordon in him, and the fact that they got him in the second round. I mean, that's just a steal, especially after acquiring DeForest Buckner. They missed out on their first-round pick. They traded away their first-round pick, but they got 2 first-round caliber players in the second round, for the Indianapolis Colts in the draft. And not only that, they also possibly got the replacement for Phillip Rivers in the 4th round in Jacob Eason, who has first-round talent, but due to work ethic and reports that he's not such a great teammate and things like that, he did end up falling to the 4th round. And it's something that, hey, you know what? If it works out, it works out. And if it doesn't, we could go ahead and draft another quarterback. We didn't really commit anything to this guy, so just steal for them in the 4th round. Team that I hated, this one might surprise you, the Miami Dolphins. So I was expecting with 14 picks for them to just make a bunch of moves and bring in a bunch of studs, and they had the opportunity to do so. So they got an A+ from me with their first round pick with their first pick in the first round with Tua. They got their quarterback. Check that one off the list. Then I said that in episode 22, you know, once you go quarterback, if you go Tua, you got to go offensive tackle, and they addressed it. My only problem with that was I think they reached for Austin Jackson a little bit earlier than they should have. Wasn't a fan of that. Not a fan of players from the Big 12, especially taking them that early in the first round. There is a lot of upside. He's a good character guy, so I like that pick in that sense. But when you have guys like Josh Jones that fell to the 3rd round, and some of these other guys like Ezra Cleveland falling down to the 2nd round, I think we could have utilized that number 18 pick to acquire a need, and we just didn't do that. I think if CeeDee Lamb would have fallen to them at 18, we would have gone CeeDee Lamb, but I don't know. I thought we reached for Austin Jackson. And then later on in the draft, you know, we did trade back and took Noah a cornerback from Auburn. I'll learn to say his last name eventually. Wasn't a fan of it because we already have Byron Jones and Xavier Howard, but apparently this is a cornerstone guy. I'm assuming Xavier Howard is on his way out of Miami. And then amongst other things, you know, we had a chance to draft Jonathan Taylor. We took another offensive tackle, which, again, I approve of. Really like that guy. Looked like a beast. But we had a chance to get Jonathan Taylor. We had a chance to get Antoine Winfield. We had a chance to trade up to get J.K. Dobbins. I'm surprised we didn't do that. The Ravens took him a pick before. It was a solid draft because we got all of our needs, but it wasn't the sexy draft that I was hoping for. I did expect a little bit more. Team that I love, the Baltimore Ravens. What else is new? I mean, these guys hit it out of the park every single year. Not only were they able to address all of their few needs that they needed, but they acquired so much talent. I mean, the fact that they were able to get J.K. Dobbins there in the 2nd round, that was a steal. Justin Bulky from Texas A&M. I mean, what a pick right there. That was the guy that I wanted. I'm not sure why the Dolphins didn't take him over the defensive lineman from Alabama, but it is what it is there. And then they were able to pick up some weapons there for Lamar Jackson. Wide receiver Devin DuVernay from Texas. He, again, one of those wide receivers that just fell to the draft due to the depth of this wide receiver core in this draft. And then they got guys like, you know, Malik Harrison from Ohio State. They killed it in this draft. I thought they got some really good steals. They got Geno Stone in the 7th round from Iowa, who's a guy that maybe gets overlooked because of his size. I mean, I'm not really sure because he was a productive player for Iowa. So they hit it out of the park. Every single one of their picks, A+ for the Baltimore Ravens. Next team I did not like was the Dallas Cowboys. So one of their biggest issues a year ago was that they could not get to the quarterback, and I thought that they would address that in the 1st round. I get it. CeeDee Lamb fell to their laps. That was the best player available. But that pick did raise some questions for me, and something that maybe Cowboys fans should be concerned with. My first thought was, okay, Mike McCarthy's trying to turn this into the Green Bay Packers, because that's what he did with Aaron Rodgers. They said, you know what, screw defense. We're just going to try to outscore everybody and try to win that way, and look how that turned out. Aaron Rodgers now wasted his prime of his career because he kept on losing 55 to 44 ball games, His defense couldn't stop a nosebleed, right? So that's my concern. The other concern that I had was maybe the Cowboys wanted to give Dak an extra weapon to boost his numbers. And what I mean by that is, obviously right now, Dak is on somewhat of a holdout because of his contract negotiations, but maybe the Cowboys are trying to justify the amount of money that they're about to pay him, saying, we know that he's not worth maybe $35 million a year based off of talent, based off where he ranks, compared to other quarterbacks. But if he's got all these weapons and he's putting up tremendous numbers, then you can kind of defend the $35 million. Like, hey, you know what? He's throwing for over 4,500 yards every single year and 30 touchdowns. He's worth that money. We just got to get him help on defense. Those were my first two thoughts when they did that. But either way, I think they try to address some of that, also by bringing in guys like Aldon Smith, bringing back Randy Gregory. But those are question marks. They've been out of the game for a while, and it's like, what are they really going to be able to produce here for the Dallas Cowboys? I don't see them being a playoff team next year. I think they took some steps backwards. So I did not like their offseason, did not like their draft. Last team that I loved, and this one might come in as a shock, the Jacksonville Jaguars. So they cleaned house and they acquired all these picks, and everybody's question was, are they going to end up taking a quarterback? Not only didn't they take a quarterback, but they upgraded literally everywhere else. They took a corner from Florida there with their first pick in the first round. They took Clamon Chasen from LSU and with their second pick in the first round. They got a wide receiver. They upgraded the defensive line, upgraded on offensive tackle. I mean, they covered every aspect of their team except for quarterback and running back. Obviously, they got Leonard Fournette, so running back isn't really an issue for them. And they said that they were going to give Gardner Minshew a year, which now gives them an opportunity. If they do struggle with Gardner Minshew, it will give them an opportunity to acquire either Trevor Lawrence or Justin Fields next year. So they put themselves in a great position to start taking off again. I mean, they had that one successful year in 2017, and then they dipped. So maybe, now that they clean house, they got some new players in, they got rid of Tom Coughlin. Maybe this is a good big step forward for the Jacksonville Jaguars and their future. The last team that I did not like, and I think there's not one person here that'll disagree with this one, is the Green Bay Packers. As I'm sure you've heard, the Packers traded up in the first round to take quarterback Jordan Love from Utah State, which is really, really weird. I understand you have an aging quarterback. I understand you have, that he's declining in his progression. But you were 13-3 last year and were one game away from the Super Bowl. Instead of building off of that, you're thinking about 4 years down the road, which doesn't make sense to me. You're right there. And now what you have basically told your team and your entire fan base is that we're not thinking about next year. We're thinking about years ahead. And what message does that send to your current quarterback is, well, we're already thinking of replacing you because we don't know, how much more you have left in the tank. I get it. He's got declining numbers, but Aaron Rodgers is a Hall of Fame quarterback and he could still sling it, man. And I don't know how much longer he has there. He's got 3 years left on his deal. I'm assuming that he's going to request a trade either in a year or two. And the Packers just took big strides backwards, and not the year to do that. I mean, they lost to the San Francisco 49ers in the NFC Championship. You got, even in their own division, Minnesota had a spectacular draft. That's probably one of the next team I would have mentioned on my love list. Detroit had an excellent draft, and I don't think Detroit is as far off as people think. And the NFC is just that much harder now that you have Tom Brady in there with the Bucs. The Saints are still there. The Seahawks. I mean, there's just so much competition in the NFC. And I think the Packers were that one playoff team that's just going to take about 4 steps backwards. I could see them being 9-7, even 8-8 next year. And again, once you backpedal that much, they've gone from being the best team, I wouldn't say the third best team, but for sure the second best team, and then fighting with the Bears and the Lions for the third best team in that division. The Minnesota Vikings are the clear favorites now to win that division next year because they didn't get him any weapons. I don't understand how you don't get your Hall of Fame quarterback any weapons. That's your one job. You had T. Higgins there from Clemson, who some people had a year ago, had him as the best wide receiver coming out this year, and he dropped to the Bengals with the first pick in the second round. I just don't understand it. And the other thing that bothers me too is that they not only took a quarterback in the first round, they traded up to get him when he was probably going to be there at 30. Not sure what they're doing. Not sure why they didn't address receiver later on in the draft either. I mean, they went running back with their second pick. Just not sure what they're thinking. You had Aaron Jones, who was one of the more productive running backs last year in the NFL. Just a lot of question marks by the Green Bay Packers. Not sure what they're doing. They get an F from me as well. And that's going to be all for this one. Make sure you go ahead and like and subscribe on all of our platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and our YouTube channel. There won't be video of this on the YouTube channel, but the podcast will be on. So go ahead and make sure you check that out. Like and subscribe as always. Until next time, I'm signing up.